I'm so excited that I got a chance to take a picture of what was on my wall in my living room a few days ago. This is my family, y'all. Here I am at 10 years old. I am the middle child of 3. I am the apple of my father's eye because I have to be. I learned to do anything I can to be seen, heard, regarded, and accepted for all that I am. This is usually a difficult task for a middle child, but especially for me. Both of my parents grew up working in the field as sharecroppers. If you were black in Alabama 30 years before the Civil Rights Movement started, that's what you did. There was never much of a city in Huntsville, Alabama. It was all farmland. That is until the federal government decided to build Redstone Arsenal on their land. Hundreds of black families, including my dad's, were kicked off their property and forced to go make a living elsewhere. But I think somewhere in my dad's consciousness, he decided that that would not be the last time that land saw him. Only problem is, in order for him to have a job at Redstone Arsenal as anything other than custodial staff at that time, you had to have a degree in engineering. Well, the land-grant university we have in Huntsville only recently started its engineering program. If you want to study in engineering in Huntsville, you've got to go to the University of Alabama in Huntsville. Well, although Kennedy is president in 1963, guess who's governor of Alabama? Here's a hint. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. George Wallace, of course. With Kennedy's help, my dad does the unthinkable and becomes the integrator. For me, as this man's son, the goal of being seen or heard is not easily accomplished, but I spend my entire youth trying. And I thought I had found my happy place until he passed away in 2016. This is also the year of my diagnosis, as I mentioned earlier, and that's how I fell into disruption. My life went from order to chaos. When my dad passed, I tried to keep myself busy. Does that sound familiar to anybody in the room? I knew I had not yet given proper space to grieve that loss. But I didn't think my family or my community could afford me the time and space I needed to do what I had to do. So I kept moving. And I was literally lying on my deathbed, and I had to make a decision. Either I was going to build a lifeboat and escape my old life and identity, or I was going to go down with the ship. It's a good thing for me that my breakthrough happened when it did. Otherwise, I don't think I would have survived this pandemic. Is everybody with me so far? Yeah. Many of my friends have not been so lucky, and I'm afraid of what the next few months and years are going to bring. So I have decided to dedicate myself to sharing my story in the hope that someone else can find a healthy life and authentic life before they run out of time. So now the framework. You've been hearing me prelude this. So now we're about to start this work. Y'all ready? Take a breath. Okay. There are books, sir. There may be some over there. There may be some over there in the chair. I published the disruption presentation that I'm alluding to. I published it this year, and today's presentation is going to be in the next book. So, because you came today, I wanted to make sure. You got it? Okay, good. If there is someone else that you know that's not here that you would like to take a book for, please do so. If it turns out that you think you may have use for this as a group, I can get them at a very cheap price. Please contact me and let me know. I wrote this book for us. The unsung hero of this presentation is the unconscious. You've heard about this aspect of humanity largely because of the work of Sigmund Freud. Although Freud's work is considered to be the beginning of this conversation, it is Carl Jung, his one-time mentee, that really takes this understanding of the unconscious from the introductory level to maturity, which is where I hope we land today. Both of these psychological icons noticed that as they were interviewing and analyzing hundreds of patients, that there were commonalities in their stories. Some of them were having the very same dreams. Freud focused on the dream experiences that he attributed to repressed memories. But Jung saw something more. Although Freud believed that it was often through dreams that a person could discover some emotion he had previously repressed or desired he'd forgotten about, Jung discovered that through the unconscious, a person could dream from a place that he had never been or ever had any prior personal experience of. And this is where our stars began to align. Jung believed that with our humanity, imprinted on our DNA is a cosmic blueprint of possibilities and energies that we are not conscious of. He calls this the collective unconscious. Jung notices that throughout human history, different cultures from parts of the world that have not touched have the same blueprint. So when a person is born into this world, he inherits a collective unconscious that is shared over time and space, even millennia. That was a lot. Is everybody okay? Can I keep going? Yeah. Jung believed that dreams are the best way to connect with one's collective unconscious, but it's not the only way. Jung uses this discovery as he begins investigating different cultural traditions, mythologies, and religions. He notices that although each presents variations on a theme, the characters, the plots, and the energies are all the same in all of them. So whereas when Freud, his mentor, found patients in inappropriate relationships with their mothers and fathers, he saw their plight through the mythological lens of Oedipus. We're familiar with Oedipus. Somebody say who Oedipus is, just in case. What's the story of Oedipus? What does Freud have us know about Oedipus as it relates to inappropriate relationships?
He slept with his mother.
Yeah, Oedipus slept with his mother and wanted to kill his father, right? And so when Freud, so you've heard people, we've made this popular, this is now popular culture. So if you have a crazy dream, you tell certain people about certain dreams you had. First thing they're gonna do is try to deduce some kind of sexual identity from your dream. I've had people do this to me my whole life. It gets on my nerves more than anything else. I think it's one of the most invasive, intrusive, inappropriate things you could ever say to a person. But it happens all the time. That's because Freud's way of dealing with this through psychoanalysis has become popular. And most therapists, most analysts are in some ways Freudian in their psychoanalysis. But that's not the only way. It's what I'm trying to present. So, whereas Freud found patients in inappropriate relationships with their mothers and fathers, and he saw their plight through the lens of Oedipus and believed that this was the example of the universal myth that described the human experience. This is everybody. This isn't strange to Freud. Freud actually had his own issues, y'all.
Yes.
The reason why Freud sees sex and everything is because Freud has sex on his mind. If you go see a therapist that has unresolved issues in their own life and lens, they're not going to be able to see anything in your life that's disconnected from that. That's the problem with going through any kind of man to get wholeness. And what I'm trying to do is free us from the need to go through some person, some agency, some grant, because they may have their own issues that they end up projecting onto you that adds to the issues you need to resolve.
What's up with that?
So, what I'm trying to tell you is that built into your DNA is all of the tools you need to stay healthy and whole. Already. But most of us have never been told that, so we don't look for it. And what Jung says is that if you pay attention to your dreams and other opportunities that you take to connect with your unconscious, you will get information from your body about what's wrong with you. That'll preach. Come on now.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Right there.
I'm gonna keep going, but I could just shout off of that.
That's good stuff.
If your therapist is racist, you won't be able to talk to them about any issues involving your race and what happens to you. If your therapist is homophobic, you won't be able to talk to them about any of those issues. Their stuff will be in your way. That's all I'm saying.
That's right.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. Jung says, I'm sorry, was there a question?
Also, if your therapist is even secretly black and then she's not a male, she doesn't understand that you're going through either.
Absolutely. How could she?
Barriers.
How could she? How could she? And you shouldn't expect her to, and shouldn't be mad when she doesn't.
Right. And she should be mad if you don't know.
And then she shouldn't be mad. Right, exactly. So, Jung says that these relationships, the thing we were talking about with mothers and fathers earlier, that's not the universal myth. Everybody doesn't have that problem. And this is why Jung and Freud separated their relationship, because Jung realized that Freud has some problems that are not his problems and that are not universal, so he created his own ideology, which is what we're talking about today. So one question that you could ask your therapist is, are you Jungian or are you Freudian in your approach? That's a separating thing. This is a picture of the Fisher King. This is a much less known mythology. If you guys are familiar with King Arthur and his court and all of the Excalibur and all of that stuff, the Fisher King is a part of that analysis. This is another mythology that Jung says is connected to the universal human experience, not Oedipus. Cinderella is another example of a mythology of a successful universal human story. If you notice, some of the same characters that you would find in Oedipus are in Cinderella, but the hero's response to their conflict is different. Oedipus sleeps with his mother instead of confronting her. Cinderella, the hero, fights the divine feminine figure, right? And wins. That is the hero's story. Whereas instead of falling in love with the controlling divine feminine figure as Oedipus does, the hero story requires that the conflict be fought and the battle be won. Jung describes this hero's journey as the process of first identifying and then facing your conflicts instead of succumbing to them. By adopting a practice of inner work, one can begin the process of integrating the various personalities of the self. Jung calls this process individuation. Individuation is a big word. I think I've introduced this to you before. Most of us are not familiar with this, but it just means this is the process of becoming one's complete self. If you notice, look at this diagram. I did not create this diagram. This diagram was created by one of Carl Jung's students. But it analyzes different aspects of the self, and it talks about how you have to push and pull all of those areas toward a center. You may recognize some of these concepts, and we're going to talk about some of them before. Everybody knows what a persona is, right?
Yes.
You know what the ego is, right? We're talking about the ego. You know, you see the archetypes? The archetypes over here, this part. I thought about recreating this but I decided that it was good enough. This is where the mythology, this is where Oedipus, this is where Cinderella, this is where any story, if you dream about these figures, this is your DNA, and this is your experience over here. This is what actually has happened to you. Sometimes something that has happened, I don't know how far I want to go into this, but let me just say it. Sometimes things that have happened to your parents become a part of your unconscious. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
And this is important to know. Sometimes the things that have happened to your parents that have not happened to you become a part of your unconscious.
Yeah.
Did you guys know this? So what that means is you are inheriting trauma. It's in your bloodstream, but it's not yours. For those of us who are here as vestiges of slavery, we have so many generations and generations and generations of unresolved trauma that's in our unconscious that we'll dream about or be connected with or be affected by, but it's not part of our personal experience.
But it's in our DNA.
It's in the DNA.
Yeah.
But if the sickness is in the DNA, I'm trying to get you to understand, so must be the cure. It only stands to reason. But if the person who's helping you process your pain is more connected and more influenced and more excited about your sickness, then all your conversations are going to be about sickness and not about cure. So you have to take control even when you're the client or the patient. And you have to begin directing your own process. I know about the trauma, doctor. Tell me about the cure. What do I do with it? How do I manage it? Right? How do I carry it? Do I succumb to it? Do I let it overtake me in the middle of 3, 4, 5, 6 pandemics that we're in? Do I let it overtake me? Every time I go on Facebook, every time I go on social media, I find out about another friend, another relative, another neighbor who's died from COVID-19. Do I let it overtake me? What do I do? Do I put my head in the sand and ignore it and act like it's not happening?
Take control.
You have to participate in your own process.
Right.
Okay, I love this image more than anything else. I actually didn't take the picture of the iceberg, but this is a perfect example of our constitution, I'll say it that way. What makes you, you, right? So most of us think we are our ego. That's actually an apple that the guy has thrown in the air, right? That's how much of you your ego is. If this whole thing, and this is just a picture, this isn't just, if this is you, right? If you're this much, your ego is that much.
Oh Lord, have mercy. It's the apple, that's right.
When you make I statements, I'm tired, I'm excited, I'm good, I'm mad, I'm pissed off, I'm jealous, I'm envious, you're only talking about your ego. That's who I is. Any I statement you ever made, it's that much. This is your consciousness up here. So you're aware of other aspects of you that you know you're not referring to with your I. But what Jung is saying is even with all of that information, there's far more of you that you're unaware of, that you don't even know to check on. And so when your body is being ignored in this way, it will begin sending you messages to try to say, hey, we're not good. You might be good, but we're not good. The rest of you is not good. So here's a dream. Here's a headache. Here's a migraine. Here's an ulcer. Here's a restlessness. Here's apathy. Here's a loss of zeal for life. Here's loss of your appetite. Here's I don't want to go to work. Here's I don't want to talk to anybody. Things that's happening to you in your body trying to tell you that you need to adopt some type of practice to manage yourself. Any questions? I know I'm giving you volumes of stuff. I want to make sure you're processing it. For those people who've just come into the room, there are books available. We may have passed out some of them. If I can just hand some books out to people, everybody should have a book for coming. You stayed through the storm. We praise God for your testimony.